guys, welcome to Politically Provoked, an interactive podcast where we host debates, panels, and interviews. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to keep up to date with all our future debates and panels. Man, this lighting is weird. All right, so we are going to be JQing today. So let's bring on our guest. First up, let's bring on Jonah. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
So yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you.
I'm going to tilt that down. Yeah, I'm Jonah. I'm a lefty. I have a YouTube channel called Quibbles Over Coffee. I'm on Twitter at QuibblesC. That's about what matters.
Okay. Next up, let's bring on MartinezPerspective. How are you?
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. So yeah, same question. Where people can find you, where you lie on the political spectrum, and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I run a podcast called Martinez Perspective. I'm a white separatist. You can find me on Odysee, Telegram, Bitchute, and Gab. But as I said last time, I'm getting banned everywhere, so it's just how it works.
All right. Well, obviously we are not on our normal YouTube page, but we are on Odysee. So yeah, make sure you're following us because our spicier debates will be, and then we'll probably upload it to Bitchute. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Each person can give an opening statement. It can be as little as 1 minute, no longer than 5, about the topic and your stance. After that, we will open up the floor. For those of you guys watching, if you have questions, tag Politically Provoked, who your questions addressed to, and we will get to them during the Q&A. All right, so and we'll do closing statements and final thoughts after the Q&A. So Martinez, you want to go first?
I'll throw it to him. Just give me the link. I haven't posted in my Telegram yet, so if you can show me the link there.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the private chat.
All right, so you can go ahead, Jonah.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I think that the basic question that I have is sort of what do I need to do to sort of get you to want me to be in your country? What do I need to do to get you to accept that Jews exist and that we are going to continue to exist? And that's basically the goal. If there's sort of a breakdown of that, the breakdown would be sort of like what's the value culturally of having diversity, and if there's not, why not? When you think about American culture, what is American culture? So I'd argue that there's a lot of interesting things that are sort of the result of that diversity. So I'd think about stuff like music, I think about stuff like food, I think about stuff like sports. And I think that when we're thinking about how those things sort of happened, I think that the thing that I come to is broadly the sort of collective effects of having a bunch of different peoples that have been historically separated coming together and making something that's sort of more beautiful and more impressive than any could do on their own.
All right, so I'm just going to give a bit of a rundown, kind of a summary here. So the Jewish question ultimately stems from the idea that Jews are disproportionately powerful, and they use their power for the near exclusive benefit of their group. And Jews are indeed one of the most privileged and influential ethnic groups in the world. According to Pew Research, 44% of American Jews earn over $100,000 a year, the highest of all religious groups in the country. According to Ynet News, Israeli outlet, Jews comprise 25% of the richest multimillionaires and billionaires in the U.S. A Russian banking website, Lanta.ru, calculated that 25% of the richest Russians today are Jewish. This is a reality in many other countries, the UK, Canada, France, Australia, and Germany. The Jewish author Henry L. Feingold revealed in his book, Jewish Power in America, that over 60% of campaign funds collected by the Democrats and a respectable percentage of the Republican funds stem from Jewish sources. And Jews have an ethno-state, Israel, that is armed with nuclear weapons while it works to prevent its neighbors from obtaining these weapons. Their state is lavished with billions in annual foreign aid, diplomatic protection at the UN, and various means of support from the most powerful countries, thanks in large part to the enormously influential Israeli lobby led by AIPAC. Many scholars like James Petrus, Mersheimer and Walt, as well as former Congressperson Cynthia McKinney, Paul Finley, and James Traficant have said that the Israeli lobby controls the U.S. Congress. In fact, Donald Trump just said this recently in an interview. Traficant said, "I believe Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars in which we have little or no interest. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted. And then if they don't beat you at the poll, they'll put you in prison. Not only have many scholars and former politicians said this, but many prominent Jews themselves have boasted of their power. Stephen Steinlight, the former director of the American Jewish Committee, said, "Our disproportionate political power is pound for pound the greatest of any cultural ethnic group in America. The great material wealth of the Jewish community will continue to give it significant advantages. We will continue to court and be courted by key figures in Congress. Our power is exerted within the political system from local to national level through soft money, the provision of out-of-state funds to candidates sympathetic to Israel. It's also true that Jewish economic influence and power are disproportionately concentrated in Hollywood, television, and the news industry," he said. Alan Dershowitz, a famous Jewish lawyer, said, "People say the Jews are too powerful, too strong, too rich. We control the media. We often apologetically deny our strength and our power. Don't do that. We've earned the right to influence public debate. We've earned the right to be heard. We've contributed disproportionately to the success of the country. Never apologize for using our strength and our influence." Criticizing Jews publicly is career suicide for prominent persons and could even land you in prison. Jews are one of the main groups afforded special protections under so-called hate speech laws. Majority of prosecutions for hate speech in Canada, France, Germany, and the UK are brought against so-called anti-Semites. Indeed, Jewish groups like the ADL, the Canadian Jewish Congress, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, were instrumental in lobbying governments to prosecute criticism of Jews as hate speech. They've also attempted to shut down criticism of Israel as hate speech. Jews also forced Holocaust denial laws upon much of Europe, making this dubious event one of the few events that can't be questioned publicly. The truth fears no investigation, but apparently Jews fear the truth. The U.S. government has a special office called the Office to
I just
Monitor
feel like this has
and
been
Combat
probably more than 5 minutes.
Anti-Semitism.
Do you want to just start to?
He's got a minute left.
Oh, okay.
He's got
Cool.
a minute. I'm timing.
My fault. Go for it.
The U.S. government has a special office called the Office to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism that develops and implements policies and projects to support efforts to combat anti-Semitism internationally. It also has a special Jewish liaison that is a, quote, role charged with serving as the presidential administration's voice to the Jewish community, gathering the community's consensus viewpoint on issues affecting it. So evidently, many governments view Jews as separate from other citizens and give special concern to their wants, needs, and safety. Voltaire once said, "To know where power lies, ask whom you can't criticize." This maxim reveals the power of the Jews today.
Cool.
Are you finished? Okay, go ahead. Let's open the floor up.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially the basic tenor, and correct me if you disagree with this, is that you think that Jews are richer and more powerful than we should be. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yes, and many Jews have attested to that fact.
And you mean that on a per capita basis, right? You don't mean that on an aggregate basis. You mean that on a per capita basis?
Well, according to the Pew Research, per capita Jews are the richest religious group in the country, 100,000 per year. And they're
I'm not familiar with that. That wouldn't shock me. Why?
Well, I'm sure the argument I'm sure you're going to make is that they're some either racially or culturally superior, right?
No. Why do you think that the Jews that have immigrated to the United States, do you think that they're going to be richer? The same thing is true, by the way, of Indians, for example. Why do you think that Indians that come to the United States on average are going to be richer, that Jews that come to the United States are going to be on average richer?
Well, the claim that they're just higher IQ than other people.
That's not my claim.
That's
not my claim.
I have a calculation of this. So like the claim is that Jews have like a 1 standard deviation higher IQ than non-Jewish whites. But even if it's true, this guy.
That's not the claim I'm making.
But
the claim I'm making. The reason so I'll just explain the reason that I think it is. The reason I think it is I think that Jews who were poor were killed in the Holocaust, right? And therefore they are not the ones who are coming to the United States because they're dead. Right. So the people who survived the Holocaust were the ones who were able to escape the Holocaust. People who are able to escape the Holocaust are people who are disproportionately going to be richer. And they're people who are going to be disproportionately able to access things like, immigration papers, people who are going to be disproportionately able to access things like a boat that you have to pay for, things that people who are going to be able to disproportionately access, all of these different connections, people who are better educated, people who are better off financially are going to be better able to get out of the country. Is that fair?
It could be fair, but the point is that this disproportionate power does not add up if you're just looking at them being educated and so forth. Because if the calculation this guy made, it's on a website called Thultide. He plugged it into this calculator and he found that Jews are 5.4 million in the United States. That's their population.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd only have 297,000 people above 135 IQ. Globally, they'd only have 613,000 people above that IQ.
I've never claimed that we're
1.9. But hang on a second. There's 1.9 million whites
this is
above,
not a response to
above
my
that
point.
IQ.
Martinez,
Well,
this
I'm
is not a
just
response to my
I'm
point.
pointing out that their intelligence does not account for the fact that they're
I didn't
so
say it did.
disproportionately powerful.
I didn't say it did. I said that people who are better educated, which is different than more intelligent, and people who are
Not
wealthier,
really.
which is different than more intelligent, are the ones who are more likely to be able to get out of the country of Germany or of Poland, right?
But so you're saying that they're essentially more intelligent. What's your argument then?
My argument is that when you're talking about the fact that Jews are on average richer, or you're talking about the fact that Indians are on average richer, you're not saying that Indians are smarter. You're not saying that Jews are smarter. What you're saying is that because of the circumstances that allowed certain people to come into the country and didn't allow other people to come into the country, you're affecting who is going to be sent, right? And therefore, what the result of that is.
None of this really matters. I'm pointing out that they have this disproportionate power. It doesn't add up just based on the idea that they go to school more, they study more, and so on. The percentages don't work out because there's way more white people with a IQ higher.
And there are way more rich white
135.
people than there are rich Jews, right? But it's about the proportion. It's not about the aggregate.
Proportion of it is so out of whack that this cannot be explained purely through.
Do you have data to back that up?
What do you mean? I've just given you some data. 25%
you've shown that
of
Jews
the
are on average. Yeah, you've shown that on average. You've shown that Jews are on average wealthier in the United States than non-Jews.
On merit, right?
Wait,
so if it's purely on merit, we wouldn't expect
Martinez,
to find this number
you
of
have
Jews
said you've shown
running
that on
media,
average. You've shown that
running
on average.
Everything essentially.
Okay, you've shown on average that Jews are wealthier than non-Jews in the United States. I have agreed to that. That's obviously the case. The question is why. Now, my suggestion is the reason might be that because of the Jews who did manage to get into the country, compared to the Jews who were not able to into the country, you are looking at a skewed data set, right? You're looking at a data set only of the Jews who managed to escape the Holocaust. You're not looking at the Jews that didn't escape the Holocaust.
None of this matters to me. I'm pointing out that Jews have this massive disproportionate power. They control the U.S. Congress. Even Trump acknowledged they control the U.S. Congress for the benefit of Israel. They run these political movements like neoconservatism. It was a Jewish movement from the very beginning to start wars in the Middle East because they're loyal to Israel. And I can give you a bazillion quotes from Jews confirming this.
Aren't Jews like 90% Democrats?
They influence politics. Do you want me to give you the quotes about neoconservatism? And
I don't really care about like random individual quotes. I care about like in aggregate. If we're talking about the number,
let's look at these quotes then.
Democrats versus Republican, right? Like there are Jewish Republicans, but the aggregate.
It's true that Jews disproportionately vote for Democrats. That doesn't mean the neoconservatives aren't a Jewish movement, a Zionist movement. So you had the founders of neoconservatism were Leo Strauss, Norman Podhoretz, Irving Kristol, Max Shachtman.
You don't think it was like Ronald Reagan? You don't think that like
no?
None of the, wait, which of those people are president?
Just let them finish. Let's let each other finish.
So here's one quote from here's one quote from a Jewish newspaper. It says, "Acknowledging the Jewishness of neoconservatism has always triggered the red lights of anti-Semitism, but there is some truth to the suspicion. If there is an intellectual movement in America to whose invention Jews can lay sole claim, neoconservatism is it. And it is a fact that as a political philosophy, neoconservatism was born among the children of Jewish immigrants and is now largely the intellectual domain of those immigrants' grandchildren." The Israeli paper Haaretz said the war in Iraq was conceived by 25 neoconservative intellectuals, most of them Jewish, who are pushing the President Bush to change the course of history. Wolfowitz, Fife, Pearl,
I just don't understand why this is relevant.
Abrams. All of these Jews
I
in
don't
the,
understand why
in
you're
the
just
Bush
reading off Reagan
administration.
quotes. What's the benefit of
I'm
this?
proving to you that Jews created the war in Iraq. Okay,
So do you think that
they
like
have
maybe
this enormous political lobby power to
so
get what they want in
was
the world.
Bush Jewish?
Doesn't have to be Jewish. A lot of his advisors were Jewish. Pearl Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith in the
Was his
Pentagon.
secretary?
Literally,
Okay, who was his Secretary of State?
Douglas Feith in
Who
the
was his
Pentagon
secretary?
literally
Wait,
had
who was Bush's Secretary of State?
a portrait of Theodore Herzl in his house,
Who
and he was the
was?
guy
I don't care. I don't
concocting.
care what art people have in their households. I care
It's
about
proof
like
that
who the
he's a
Secretary of State
Zionist.
was. Who was Secretary of State under
You tell
Bush?
me, who was it?
Who was? My point is like if we look at the actual people who are actually in power, whether we're talking about Secretary of State or we're talking about defense or we're talking about the presidency, there's literally never been a single Jewish president, right? So the
It
idea
doesn't have
that
to be
like
the Jewish president. We look at the people in the Pentagon, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and Feith. Those three Jews created all the
there
propaganda
were
about
Jews in
weapons of
high
mass
places, but
destruction.
not the highest place, right?
It doesn't matter. Bush was a puppet. Bush was just doing what they told him to do.
What am I supposed to do to convince you that Bush was not a puppet and that Bush was actually president, or that Reagan was actually president, or that
Because Bush was an idiot. He was a buffoon. You think he created the war in Iraq?
Yeah, I do. I think that he was the one who. Yes.
And why did they go to war in Iraq? Why do you think they went to war in Iraq?
I think for a variety of reasons. I think that there was a need to have a response to 9/11. I think there's a lot of reasons that
9/11.
I think there's lots.
What did Iraq do with 9/11?
Absolutely
nothing.
I think there's a lot of reasons that people go to war. I think many of them are bad reasons.
I'll give you the main reason.
I don't think we can just like wave our fingers and read some quotes and say, "Ooh, there's some art on the walls," and therefore it was all the Jews, right? That seems a little silly.
There's proof. So Richard Pearl, he was one of the leading proponents of the war. Mm-hmm. He's a Jewish Zionist. He wrote a paper for Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996 called "The Clean Break." He did. David Wormser and Feith. And they said it's an important Israeli strategic objective to overthrow Saddam Hussein. And
wait, so you're talking about the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Global Strategic Affairs under Ronald Reagan?
No, he was in the Bush administration, as well as Douglas Feith and Paul Wolfowitz.
Okay, so
Paul Wolfowitz
this might sound controversial.
Architect of the war.
This is going to sound controversial. Okay, you ready? I think that the first Assistant Secretary of Defense for Global Strategic Affairs is not as important as the actual Secretary of Defense. Was the Secretary of Defense Jewish?
No, but he was a neoconservative who was in the same. He was in the same group.
Okay, so your trouble is not actually with the Jews. Your trouble is with neoconservatism.
It is. So Paul Wolfowitz, the New York Times said he's friendly with Israel's generals and diplomats. He's a hero to the Jewish neoconservative movement. He's one of Israel's staunchest allies.
Martinez, you're just talking about some random assistant. I don't care about the assistant, right?
Paul Wolfowitz was one of the most powerful people in the Pentagon pushing the war in Iraq.
He was important. He was not the most important. If we're talking about the most important people, they're all Christian. Now, I don't think that the problem is Christianity. I think the problem is neoconservatism, right?
So Christians had no interest in overthrowing Saddam Hussein. Israel
That's not true.
did.
Bush did.
Israel hated.
That's not true. Bush
Israel
did.
hated Saddam Hussein.
Is Bush not a Christian now?
So Netanyahu
is Bush a secret Jew? I'm confused.
Netanyahu went to the Congress in 2002, and he said, to conceal the efforts Saddam Hussein's making at hiding WMDs, we in Israel have known this for a long time, and we've shared it with the U.S. Once Saddam has nuclear weapons, the terror network will have nuclear weapons. The next thing you'll see is a nuclear bomb in the World Trade Center. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee we'll have enormous positive reverberations throughout the region. I think it's a good choice.
Netanyahu is bad. I don't understand what the argument is. Yes, I disagree.
The argument is that Netanyahu is the architect of the war on terror. He's the architect of the war in Iraq.
You think that Israel has more? What's the military budget of Israel? And let's compare that to the United States. Which one do you think is more involved? Of course it matters. Which one do you think is? AIPAC controls the Congress.
Yes, like many of the people I just cited.
AIPAC isn't even the largest of like the pro-Israel groups.
Yes, AIPAC, it is.
No, it's not. Kufi is larger. Kufi is larger than AIPAC. There are more people in Kufi than in AIPAC. It's not even the largest in the pro-Israel lobby, let alone in lobbies writ large. What are you talking about?
So you're admitting that the pro-Israel lobby is powerful, right? That
of course it is. There's lots of lobbies that are powerful. Yeah, there's an oil lobby that's powerful. There's a coal lobby that's powerful. There's a healthcare lobby that's powerful.
No interest in starting the war in Iraq, but Jewish neoconservatives did. Absolutely.
Wait, you don't think the oil lobby had any interest in Iraq, really?
No, not to overthrow Hussein. They had interest in doing business with him, not to throw him.
Yeah,
throw
they
him out of
tried
the
to, and
country.
then he stopped doing business, and that's part of.
There's no,
This
he
is-
didn't. No, he didn't. There's zero evidence that oil companies wanted that war. There's not one oil company
There's
that was
no-
lobbying for that war. But all of these Jewish neoconservatives
Yeah.
were in the Pentagon pushing the lies about WMDs, pushing the lie that he was connected to Osama bin Laden. Netanyahu said 9/11's good for Israel. Right?
I don't
Because
understand why
it's
you
swung
keep on bringing up
public opinion.
Netanyahu. Like I defend
Because
Netanyahu.
he's the one
There are-
who
there are,
orchestrated all of this.
Okay, so there are Jews that I agree with, and there are Jews that I disagree with, right? Because like, it's just that's how things work, right? Like Jews disagree with other Jews. Do you accept those?
Yeah, there are Jews who don't agree with each other. So what?
Okay, so when you're saying that like there is some assistant secretary to whoever it was, right? Who has this view that you think is bad?
There were 30 Jews in
your
the Bush
problem-
administration, 30 in the
How many
top
Christians?
positions.
Wait, how many Christians were in top positions?
It doesn't matter. Christians don't want this war in Iraq. It's Jews that want
Christians-
it. Okay.
We just
You don't-
said that George Bush.
I just
wanted
gave
to
you
go to
proof.
war,
I
and
just
then
gave you
he was just a
absolute
puppet
proof.
to the Jews. What do I need to do to convince you that Bush is actually president, or was actually president, or that Trump actually was
It
president?
doesn't matter. He's the president, but he's following the
Right,
advice.
but like, what do I need to
He's
do to
following the
convince you?
advice of these neoconservative Jews.
Okay, you're just
who
saying that.
themselves
You're just
said-
positing that. You're not actually like
who
defending why.
themselves have called for overthrowing Saddam Hussein to help
Martinez,
Israel.
you're not explaining why you think that.
I have a letter here from neoconservatives to Bush. They said, Mr. President,
people write letters.
we
I don't
urge you
understand
to
that.
accelerate plans to remove Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq.
When you're an
He
assistant
says-
secretary, your
he
job
says
is to try
Saddam
to
Hussein,
convince
if
the
he
president
remains
to
in
do what you
power,
want to do.
if he remains in power, he is a supporter and funder of terrorism against Israel. He needs to be removed from power. There you go. This is from their own
Next
mouths.
time I talk to you, I should just bring a bunch of letters from Christians saying things that I don't
From-
like, and
from
just
the
say,
most
the
powerful-
Christians are
from the most
terrible.
powerful
Look at this. I
policymakers
could probably
in
find you like an
Washington.
actual secretary, not an
We're on the
assistant
media,
secretary, like an
Bill
actual
Kristol and-
secretary who I
Bill
disagree
Kristol
with,
and Max
who said
Boot and
things
all
that were
these
bad, and
propaganda-
they were
Let's just watch
Christian.
the
Oh my
talking
God,
over,
these
guys.
Christians. These
It's
Christians are
insufferable
terrible.
talking over. So let's just wait till everybody finishes the point
Okay.
and then go at each other.
So what's your proof oil companies were behind the war in Iraq?
What's my proof that oil companies are behind the war in
Yeah, give me
Iraq?
one-
I didn't
one
know that
proof.
we were discussing the war in Iraq here. But
We're discussing
sure.
the Jewish question, yes.
Yeah. So I don't think that those are the same, personally. But I guess my question is like what would be a proof against what you're saying? What would I need to show to disagree with you?
Well, there's no proof against what I'm saying because what I'm saying is true.
I'm asking, like, if there was.
Would you want me to make your own case for you?
What
are
would
you
some?
talking
Yeah.
about?
So you're saying that the Jews are in control of everything, right? Now I'm going to say, if I were able to show you a bunch of documents, which I don't have in front of me, I will readily admit, but I imagine you will at least accept that this is possible. I could find a bunch of documents that have Christians saying really naughty things that they shouldn't say, right? Does that show that like Christians are therefore the problem?
No, this shows what I'm giving you is evidence that Israel had a strong motive to overthrow.
But my point, though, is that it's
Hussein
not
and
evidence.
Start this war. Yes, it is evidence.
It's not,
clear evidence
because-
of a direct link
Martinez,
between the people
if
who
I
started
can
the
have-
war and their
If my
motives to
counter
start that
if
war.
my counter evidence where I say here are a bunch of Christians doing naughty things isn't real evidence, which I think it pretty clearly is not, why is it evidence when you do it against the Jews?
Because the Jews had a motive to do it. You don't have a motive for Christians.
I don't have a motive for Christians to want to control the Middle East. What are you talking about?
Christians are not some power block in Washington who have a foreign policy
Every
that they
president
want to
in the
pursue.
entire history of the
Which-
country has been Christian. How are they not
So
a power
what's the
block?
Christian interest in toppling all of these Middle Eastern regimes that are enemies of Israel? They just happen to be enemies of Israel, right? It's just a coincidence.
I mean, like, are you
So-
familiar with Kufi's line of logic? There's lots of reasons. One of the reasons is because they
I'll
want
give
to
you-
have
I can give
all
you
of the Jews go
I'll give you
live
one
in Israel so that they can come and have like nuclear Armageddon, and then everyone will die, and then they can go to heaven, right? There's lots of reasons that Christians might want to do something. That's an explicitly Christian reason. There are other reasons they might want to do it that are financial. There are other reasons they might want to do it that are sort of cultural. There's lots of different reasons they might
Really
want to do
quickly,
things.
because now Justin's here, I'm gonna dip out. I'm feeling like really
So-
shitty. So,
Brittany, I'm
So,
sorry.
Can you leave him on?
Feel better.
Yeah, I'm
we
sorry.
got it.
So they started the Douglas Feith, who has a portrait of Theodore Herzl, the founder of Zionism, in his house. He started this group in the Pentagon called the Office of Special Plans, and this group in the Pentagon bypassed the CIA. It bypassed all the regular channels to push like propaganda about WMDs because the CIA wasn't going along with it. And it says that they established. It says they established.
Could you address my question? You're going on a random tirade that has nothing to do with it.
I'm giving evidence that this was a Israeli thing. It says this is the Guardian
newspaper. Can you address my question about
OSP was an open and largely unfiltered conduit to the White House, not only for the Iraqi opposition. It forged close parallel ad hoc intelligence operation inside Ariel Sharon's office in Israel, specifically to bypass the Mossad and provide Bush with the more alarmist reports on Saddam's Iraq than the Mossad was prepared to authorize. It says none of the Israelis were cleared into the Pentagon through normal channels. Instead, they were waved in on Mr. Feith's authority without having to fill in the usual forms. In 1996, he and Richard Pearl wrote a paper for Netanyahu calling for overthrow of Saddam Hussein. So this is proof this is not that this is a direct link between the Israeli government and the Pentagon. You're not addressing the question. This is an absolute stone cold proof that this was a Jewish war.
Okay, can I repeat my question? Here's my question. Kufi is not Jewish. Kufi is pro-Israel. The reason the Kufi is pro-Israel is because they want all of the Jews to go live in Israel so that they can have nuclear Armageddon to see the end of everyone who's not Christian so that they can now have, like, they can go to heaven and shit, right? Okay, so is that an example of Christians, right, for Christian reasons, trying to do things that are bad in the Middle East?
Yeah, Christian Zionists are supporters of this plan, probably, yeah. But they're not. They were not the people in the Pentagon that were doing this.
So Christians for Christian reasons, when they are in leadership positions in this country, right, are doing things that are bad in your mind because they're Christians?
They could be doing things that are bad because they're Christians, but this isn't one of them. They did this for the benefit of Jews almost exclusively.
Gotcha. Okay, so when Kufi is doing pro-Israel shit for Christian reasons, that's not really a problem, but it is a real problem when Jews are doing pro-Israel shit for Jewish reasons. This is coherent.
It's both of them are a problem, but you didn't address my point at all that this was a Zionist war. Are you denying that this was a Zionist war, that Israel wanted this?
Which war?
I just gave you absolute proof that the Israeli government was feeding the U.S. government lies about WMDs, and that these Jewish neoconservatives
it wouldn't shock me.
It
wouldn't shock me if Israel is doing things that are the interest of Israel. That would be my
expectation. The Iraq War was in the interest of Israel. This is just one example of Jewish power in America.
Yeah, if Israel was involved in the war in Iraq, Israel was probably doing what Israel thinks was in the interest of Israel. Similarly, if Saudi Arabia was involved, Saudi Arabia is probably doing what Saudi Arabia's interest.
But it wasn't Saudi Arabia in the Pentagon. It wasn't Saudi Arabia in the media.
Okay, I would expect all countries to do what they think is in their interest. So if you're arguing that this is a Canadian war because Canada was involved, I think that's a little silly. Right. I think that Canada did things that were in Canada's interest. I think America did things that they thought that were in American interest. I think Israel did things that Israel thought was in its interest. Right.
Okay. You're not disproving that this was largely a Zionist war for Zionist interests. They were writing policy papers going back to the 60s, talking about breaking up the Arab countries into pieces and so forth. This is all part of Zionism. Zionist plans to conquer the Middle East.
It's very difficult.
Use America as a battering.
It's very difficult for me to prove a negative in this context, right?
You're not even denying what I'm saying. You're just trying to divert to all these other things. I'm saying
you are correct that Israel is doing things that are in the interest of Israel. That doesn't shock me. They should. America should do things that are in the interest of America. Canada should do things that are in the interest of Canada.
And I'm telling you that.
So then I'm asking, wait. So then my follow-up question is, why, when Canada does things that are in Canada's interest, right, is that just Canada doing its own interest? But when Israel does things that's in Israel's interest, that's like some sort of crazy like conspiracy, foobity boobity bop.
Right? Canada doesn't control U.S. foreign policy. Israel does. Even Donald Trump said that the U.S. Congress is controlled by Israel. And so if Israel controls the U.S. Congress and they're starting wars that cost trillions of dollars, this is a negative influence of Jews. in
How many
America.
Christians are in Congress?
It doesn't matter. Christians
many Jews
aren't
are
the
in
ones who
Congress?
started the war in Iraq, and they didn't have the motivation to do it.
Martinez, you're just like
You're just
there's literal-
diverting.
No, there's
all of the
literal-
evidence that I've
there are-
given
There's
you
like a
dodged
literal list
completely.
of people who voted in favor of certain bills, right? There is a literal name of who was and wasn't president. There's a literal name of who was and wasn't Secretary of State. There's a literal name of who was in charge of defense, right? All of these different positions were all Christian, right?
So let
or
me give
Christian
you,
majority.
let me give you
So
another
it's
quote.
crazy to say that therefore it's the Jews.
Let me give you
I
another
disagree
quote.
with the war in Iraq too.
Neoconservatism.
Yeah.
This is from a Jewish guy named Jim Loeb. He's a journalist in Washington.
Why do we
very
care?
veteran journalist.
Why do we
He
care about
says
some random
neoconservatism
journalism,
has
bro?
largely been
I
a
care about the
Jewish
president.
movement. He says neoconservatism has largely been a Jewish movement. The defense of Israel has been a central pillar of the
There's this guy who
neoconservative
said
worldview.
something that was
The
silly
fact that
or self-serving.
neoconservatism began as a largely Jewish movement is one very relevant reason.
Yeah, so
that
Dude
they
Bro
supported
said
Israel.
something that was self-serving, and he tried to increase his own power by explaining that he had more influence than he actually did. He was an assistant
So
secretary or something. He was a journalist in
conceded the
DC.
point.
There's lots of journalists that exist in DC. Most of them
So
aren't Jewish. Most of them are Christian, right? I don't think that means that there's some Christian conspiracy to control society and destroy the Western values or some shit.
Ephraim Halevi was the head of the Mossad.
Why do we care about?
He said 9/11 benefited the Jews. There's an article that says
What?
the Israeli political
This
security
is crazy. We're
establishment
talking about
has come
Mossad
to
now.
the
I thought
conclusion that
I
the
thought we were
terror
both
attacks of
Americans. Why
September
are we
11th
talking
were
about
a
like some
comical
foreign?
miracle for Israel. Netanyahu said 9/11 and the war in Iraq were good for Israel and swung public opinion in favor of Israel. All of this connects, my friend.
So
you don't want to acknowledge it because you're Jewish
Martinez,
and you have an agenda to cover for your people.
Okay, I have an agenda to cover for my people. My people includes this random Mossad agent. My people includes
the chief of the Mossad, not some random agent. There were Mossad agents arrested on 9/11, though. They were dancing and celebrating and laughing.
Well, that's just not true.
Yes, there were. 5 Israelis were arrested in New Jersey, and they said they were celebrating because the attacks would benefit Israel.
Yeah, why don't you show me that? I'm curious.
It's an absolute fact. It was
show it to me.
ABC
If it's an absolute
News.
fact, you should show it to me.
I will.
Go for it.
So they were arrested in New Jersey.
Yeah, so I want to see the evidence. Show it to me. Todd, I don't know if we're able to put something up on.
You can put it in private chat, and then I can probably.
And then you can pull it up. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you can screen share.
If you're able to find some like any like reputable, it can be New York Times, it can be Washington Post.
Well, there's FBI documents on the dancing.
Okay, so here we go. ABC News. ABC News. Were Israelis detained on 9/11 spies? June 21st, 2002. Millions saw the horrific. Maria, who asked. Okay, so what are we looking for? Can you find the paragraph that we're talking about here?
There are Israelis who were detained.
Yeah, show me the paragraph. What are we talking about? Can you show me the paragraph?
Well, it's the whole fucking article, man.
Can you show me?
Witness named Maria.
Show me where it says that there were 5.
That there said they were like happy, you know. They didn't look shocked to me. I think it's very strange.
You got a group of guys who are taking pictures on the top of the roof of the World Trade Center. They were speaking a foreign language. They got 2 passports on him. One's got a wad of cash on him, and they got box cutters. Now that's a scary situation. This is Stephen Gordon. Who's Stephen Gordon?
It says ABC is that the FBI believed urban moving may have been providing cover for an Israeli intelligence operation. They raided the offices of this group, this moving company. And then the guy who ran the moving company, the Israeli, he went back to Israel immediately because he was fucking shitting his pants. He was being investigated. So this is one proof of Israeli involvement in 9/11. But this isn't necessarily about that. We can debate that as well, but there's so many other things to debate here. I mean, what else do you want to talk about?
I'm just, I honestly, this is a new one for me. This is not even debate. I'm just marginally curious, more than marginally curious about this idea because I've never heard the idea that we were responsible for 9/11, and this is interesting.
Well, yes, Larry Silverstein, he was the owner of the World Trade Center. He was, guess what? He was personal friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. They talked on the phone every Sunday. And he was supposed to be in the World Trade Center on 9/11, and he didn't show up.
So
That's another
There was a dude
grand
who
coincidence, right?
didn't go to work. He was a billionaire, presumably, because he
Yeah,
owned
billionaire who bought the Trade
the
Center
World Trade
6
Center.
weeks
Okay.
before the attacks, insured them heavily, and then didn't go
So
to
as a
work on
general rule,
9/11.
if I were trying to make money, I wouldn't buy
It's not about
a
making
building
money.
that I knew was going to get bombed. Or
No, he
excuse me,
got insurance
have
payout. He
planes
didn't lose any
crash
money.
into
He
them.
didn't lose any money. He got paid. He got paid back.
He didn't lose money. You're saying that the owner of the World Trade Centers got money for getting
He was
attacked,
insured. He was insured for terrorism. Yeah, he didn't lose
and
much money.
he
Maybe he
gained
lost some money.
You're
I don't know
saying
if
that
he gained money.
money.
I didn't say he gained money, but he didn't lose
Well,
much
then why would
money
I
at
do
all.
it? If okay, so
He
hear me
did it
out.
for
This is
Israel.
gonna
He
sound
did it to
controversial.
fucking help Israel.
This is going to sound
Obviously,
controversial. If I wanted to make money, right?
it's
I
not
don't
about
think
money.
that my strategy would be buy a building that I knew there were going to be 2 planes that crashed into this building a few weeks prior to the building getting
Your
crashed into.
Your
so that I
assumption's
could
completely wrong. It's not. I didn't say it
Yeah.
was about money. It's about helping Israel and
How does it
Zionism and a
help Israel
global agenda.
for an Israeli to own the? Was he Israeli or was he just Jewish?
He did business in Israel. He
Okay,
was friends
cool.
with Netanyahu.
So how does it help Netanyahu to have a buddy of his own the World Trade Centers before the World Trade Centers are broken? Or
Well,
destroyed?
because there's theories that there was explosives involved and they needed to control it for that reason. So, but that's a whole
so he
other
bought it
debate.
so that he
But
could have
the fact
explosives,
is,
so he could blow up his own building.
yeah, so they can kick off the war on terror and knock off all these regimes in the Middle East, so that Israel could be the global superpower. It
Gotcha.
makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It makes perfect sense. You're
So
totally right. That's not even remotely
Netanyahu's
absurd.
saying
You're
9/11 is
totally
good
right.
for Israel. The Mossad chief saying 9/11 is good for Israel. These dancing Israelis say it's good for Israel. These neocons say it's good for Israel. Everyone says it's good for Israel, but Israel had nothing to do with it, right?
This is just the idea that because there were like 5 dudes who I'm still reading the article and I've yet to find what you're talking about, but there were these 5 dudes who were like were dancing around on.
Yeah, they were taking pictures and video of the
So
attacks.
taking pictures, a lot of people took pictures. That doesn't seem like you're celebrating something,
They
right?
they have FBI documents which talk about them high-fiving. They have witnesses saying they were happy. There's one in that article I just mentioned.
Yeah.
They were happy about it, and they said they were happy because the attacks would benefit Israel. Now, how did they know that? How did they know who did 9/11? How did they know anything like that, unless they had foreknowledge?
I'm confused. You're saying there were so there are 5 guys who we don't know anything about. They're just random dudes, right?
No, they were probably Mossad agents of some kind.
But you have no evidence for that. You just found 5
Well,
guys.
the FBI had suspicions that they were Mossad, and they found 2 of them in a database connected to the Mossad.
So
they were Israeli military.
They were Israeli. Okay, so that doesn't mean anything, right? Because Israeli military, everyone is Israeli military. If you're an Israeli citizen,
Yes,
you
but
are Israeli military. So that means nothing. Literally nothing.
The FBI had suspicions about Urban moving their company, and they went to question the owner, and he fled to Israel.
Okay,
And he refused to answer questions.
There was a person in the United States. All 5 or just 1?
What do you mean? There was a bunch of Israelis working for a company.
So all 5 of these guys were dancing. And because of that, it was Mossad. And because it was Mossad, the Jews are responsible for the Iraq War.
They told the FBI, they said, we were celebrating because these attacks will get Americans to think as we do, to be victims of terrorism, and will turn them against Arabs. And this, of course, did turn them against Arabs and launched the entire war on terror agenda, which these neocons in the Pentagon were behind as well.
Okay, so you're upset because you're concerned that these 5 individuals were happy that Islamophobia was going to manifest in the United States.
Yeah, they wanted to start a war.
They wanted Islamophobia in the United States to start a war. Okay. So if you're concerned about that, you should just not be an Islamophobe.
No, I think we can be against the war and not love Muslims. I don't think we have. Those are mutually exclusive.
So the reason that these 5 random Jews who you don't really understand, and I certainly don't understand. I won't even pretend to.
Yeah, you don't even know anything about this.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not that well versed in 9/11 conspiracies. You've got me.
So
The reason this is a real problem is that these 5 dudes were happy that America had gotten attacked, and therefore that we were going to start a war because we've been attacked. And they thought that because we were attacked by Osama bin Laden, we were therefore going to attack Iraq, which is a country that has nothing to do with him.
Yeah, they had to concoct a whole set of lies, WMDs, to start that war. There was multiple.
Okay.
There's multiple facets to this
if I were,
thing.
Just like strictly hypothetically, to start
the war with Libya.
If I were going to try to take over the universe with my Jewish connections,
it's all sophistry,
right?
Man.
If I were, I'm just like. Earlier you were concerned that we were too smart. You were concerned that we were too educated. We were too rich, right? So
no, my concern is proof with that is that they use their power and use their riches to do things like this.
I just want to posit something. Here's my posit.
To start wars that get people killed.
If my goal were to take over the world, right? I might, for example, number 1, if I wanted a war with Iraq, I would have an Iraqi, right, be the one who attacked on 9/11, for example.
That's not how it
Number
works,
2,
okay.
If I wanted to attack, if I knew that the World Trade Center was going to be attacked, I probably wouldn't have my buddy buy the World Trade Center, personally. Number 3,
they needed him to control the security and all of that. And
I'll cede number 2. You're right. You're right. It makes perfect sense for me to have my friend lose a bunch of money because he had to buy. Yeah, of course.
You're billionaires.
Wait, I thought that the whole problem was that Jews were obsessed with money and that we were really insular and that
they're so rich they don't need to care about losing $1 billion here or there. Why do you think Sheldon Adelson throws billions at fucking politicians?
So then why do you think that we're like? I thought your whole concern was that we were like super insular and we were only focused on our own like bottom line.
My concern is all of it. They use their power, their money, their influence to do things like this, to start wars that benefit exclusively them and nobody else.
Well, if the goal is to benefit,
if the
goal is to benefit Netanyahu, if the goal is to benefit Netanyahu and Netanyahu's buddies, why would Netanyahu decide to have his buddy lose a bunch of money by buying a building that he knew was going to get attacked?
Because they needed to secure these buildings so they can control them, and some would argue put explosives in them and do all kinds of things that they needed to do.
What is this? Some would argue. You're arguing it, right?
Don't
some would argue. If you're arguing it, you're arguing it.
The war on terror. They had to blame, some group. Saddam Hussein is not.
I don't understand. Okay,
for 9/11 because he would never do 9/11.
Why are you saying some would argue when you just mean you are arguing? Just say you're arguing. It's just silly.
To start the war, right? 9/11 was to start the war on terror, and then they moved on to Iraq, and then they moved on to Libya, and then they moved on to Iran.
Why would you choose a front man?
Jews who are pushing these wars.
Why would you choose a front man? Why would you choose a front man who's from the wrong country and has connections with Saudi Arabia?
The Jew who started the war in Libya, Bernard Henry Levy, he admitted in a speech to a Jewish group that he started the war in Libya because he's a Jew and because he's loyal to Zionism. That's why they started the war in Libya.
How did we get to Libya? I'm so confused.
It's part of the same project, this PNAC, Project for the New American Century, neocon agenda, topple all these regimes that Israel doesn't.
I am not a neocon. I feel like you're like under the impression that you're arguing with a neocon right now. I'm left wing. I have no interest in defending Bush. The question is whether Bush is Bush or if Bush is actually a bunch of gremlin Jews in a trench coat.
I've given you evidence.
And the answer is, actually, he's just Bush, actually.
I've given you substantial evidence. See, you Jews have to do this. You have to point to the one Gentile in front, the front man, the window dressing.
The president. We have to point to the president who is acting commander-in-chief.
Is the president always the one calling the shots? You really think the president?
He's the
guy. There's no powerful interests behind the president.
Of course, there's powerful interests. There's lots of different powerful interests.
These neoconservatives, these Zionist lobbyists.
Neoconservatives aren't majority Jewish. We already even Zionism isn't majority Jewish.
They are.
Kufi has more members than AIPAC, right? Even Zionism, which is not the totality of our foreign policy.
He's such a liar.
So if I'm able to show you that there
Even-
are more members of Kufi than there are of AIPAC, will
I
you
don't give a
see this
fuck
point?
about Kufi. None of this matters.
Kufi is a Zionist organization. That's explicitly their charter. And there are more people in Kufi than there are in AIPAC.
Here's another Jewish journalist for you, Carl Bernstein.
Wait, why do you keep on every time that I say something that you don't want to deal with? You just like go, here's another journalist.
You're diverting
He said
the
something
point
bad.
with this stupid
Like,
shit
this
about
is silly.
Kufi and all this nonsense. None of this
Kufi
matters.
is a really important lobbying organization.
Yeah,
they have a
I
lot
don't
of
give a
power.
fuck.
They are the largest Zionistic organization in the United States of
So you're telling me
America.
that you're
They're not
arguing
Jewish.
against the idea that Jews and Zionists started this war by telling me some other Zionists were involved. Like, what is this?
I'm saying that even if you're
What the
talking
hell are
about
you
the
talking
Zionist lobby, the Zionist lobby isn't even majority Jewish. If we're talking about foreign policy
Yes, it
lobbying
is.
writ large, okay, so then I asked you, if I'm able
It
to
doesn't
show
matter
you
how many
there are
fucking
more
members
people
there are of a
in
group.
Kufi than in AIPAC, so then what does matter? How
What
do I
matters-
show you?
What matters is the political power of these lobbyists and what
Yeah.
their motivations are.
Okay, so
And
I
it
think
is
this is going to sound
largely
controversial
Jewish.
that more voters is more important than fewer voters, given that we live in a republic where voting is a thing, right?
Nobody voted for the war in Iraq. They just started that war.
They voted for Bush, though, right?
He didn't
And
say that he
Bush's
was going
poll
to.
numbers
Bush
went up.
ran. Bush ran on an anti-war ticket. He
I
lied.
agree with you. I'm not in favor of what Bush did, right? But the question is whether or not he had a support of a majority of Americans, to which the answer is directly following 9/11. Unfortunately, yes. And the
Yeah, but
question is
it-
why?
it was-
Well,
it was
it's because
started-
of Kufi. It's because of a Christian organization
because of
that had
AIPAC.
a large amount of influence. They literally are a smaller
That's what
organization
Bernstein
than
says.
Kufi.
He said we went to war against a guy who had nothing to do with 9/11. It was a pretext.
Martinez, I don't know why you keep
inexplicable.
on just
There
bringing
you
up
go to
random
Cheney
quotes
Bush
from
and the
random
Jewish-
nobodies that no one cares
Jewish
about.
neocons.
Ooh, the
He's not a
assistant
nobody.
secretary to the blah, blah,
He's
blah, blah,
not a
blah, blah.
nobody. He's a big time journalist. Carl
Oh, there's a
Bernstein. He's on
journalist who
television.
agrees with you. Oh my
Yeah,
God, but doesn't
he's a
actually
Jewish
agree with you.
journalist.
Oh, okay. So does he agree with you?
Everybody who looks into neoconservatism agrees it's a Jewish movement, except apparently you, because you're Jewish and you have an ethnic agenda to deny this.
An ethnic agenda to
You want to
I'm not trying to defend the neocons. I don't know how
Sounds
this
like
whole
you are.
argument got about to be about neocons. It's somewhat
because
confusing to me.
It's just an example of Jewish power that I'm bringing up and a negative impact of Jewish power on the country.
That there are neocons, majority Christian neocons, and that Bush
Majority
did bad
Jewish.
things.
Do you want me to name the main?
Is Kufi
I
Jewish?
don't care about Kufi. Let's look at the main.
Okay, so if
neocon
Kufi
propaganda.
is the largest Zionist organization, how do you think that Zionism, not even all of our foreign policy under Bush, but even just Zionism, is majority Jewish when it is
Because all
literally
of the leading
quantifiably
propagandists-
majority Christian?
all of the leading writers and propagandists on television and the ones promoting the war are Jewish. You got Crystal, Krautheimer,
Is Tucker
Wolfstetter,
Carlson
Wolfowitz.
Jewish?
Carlson
Is Sean
isn't even-
Hannity Jewish?
Carlson isn't even for the war.
At
he
the
wasn't even-
time, he
He wasn't even
was.
for the war.
Is Sean Hannity? Is Bill O'Reilly Jewish?
Michael
right?
Levine is Jewish.
Is Bill O'Reilly
Just about every one
Jewish?
of these neocons on television is Jewish.
I got to be
You
honest.
got,
I'm running out of neocons because
Max Boot.
is John Bolton Jewish? Right? Like I'm just trying to think about the neocons that were on.
You're just pulling up. Nobody denies that there are some non-Jews that get involved in a movement.
that the
doesn't
leaders
mean
were.
It's not Jewish.
I'm not saying.
No, the
I'm not
leaders
saying.
were
I'm not saying.
Jewish, 100%.
Okay, the leaders. When I say here's the president, he's a Christian. You say, nah, fuck you, he's a puppet. When I say here's a leader, he is Bill O'Reilly, he's the most important person on television right now. You say, nah, fuck
let's
you,
listen.
he's irrelevant. When I say here's Roger Ailes, he's a Christian. You say, nah, fuck you, like he's not. He's like
So
he's
when I give you the
Jew
names of all of
adjacent
these
or something.
Jews and their
Right?
agendas and them linking their movement to Israel and saying Israel is such an important part of their thinking, you say no, it's the Christians. So
No, I don't deny for a second that there's a Zionist. I don't deny for a second that there's a Zionist organization.
Charles Krautheimer, Stephen
Martinez,
Bryan, David
you're not-
Frum, Robert
you're just
Kagan,
straw
David
manning.
Warner,
This is
Donald
silliness.
Sackheim, Henry Kissinger,
Martinez,
Donald
this is
Carter,
silliness.
John Howard,
I
Ella
don't
Davis,
deny
Frederick
for a
Kagan,
second.
Donald Kagan,
I
Alan
do not
Dershowitz,
deny
Samuel
for a
Price,
second
Elliot
that there's
Cohen,
a Zionist
Bill
tendency
Kristol,
within
Irvin
neocons.
Kristol,
There's
Max Boot.
absolutely a Zionist tendency within neocons. The question is
You've been
not whether or not
denying
there's a
this the whole
Zionist
time.
tendency. There's a question. No, I've agreed that there's a Zionist tendency. There's a difference
You've
between
been trying to tell
Zionism
me it's
and
Christians
Jewish.
the whole fucking time,
Yes,
dude.
because Kufi is simultaneously Christian and
Kufi,
Zionist.
nobody's ever even heard of this thing.
Okay, I'm
Nobody
sorry.
cares.
You don't.
Where are
Listen,
the politicians
Martinez,
going in front of
if you don't
Kufi?
understand our foreign policy lobbying situation, like I'm sorry, right? But
Wait,
like,
so why did these politicians go to the APAC meeting and they pledge allegiance to Israel? I don't see them doing that to Kufi. They're doing that
wait,
for
do we want to just
Israel,
go through a
AIPAC.
list of people who've been involved with Kufi? We can do that.
So,
This is
so
silly.
you see every year the APAC has a meeting and they bring the politicians in front and they
Give
get
me
in
a second.
on
I'm
their
just looking
knees
at
and they say, we pledge undying support for Israel. Or fucking what's her name? Who's the Democrat
Kufi
House?
2019 summit. Give me a second. Yeah, Mike Pence spoke at the 2019 summit for Kufi. The idea that like people who are not important go like yeah, absolutely. The vice president of the United States of America went to Kufi in 2019. The idea that this is like some like very small organization that isn't taken seriously is absurd.
Yeah,
It's just flatly
doing the
absurd.
typical Jewish tactic of diverting the obvious reality of Jewish Zionism and their power and trying to blame it all on Christian Zionism.
I'm not
this is
denying
just
that there are
sleazy
Jews
tactic.
that I'm not arguing that there aren't Jews that are involved with AIPAC. There are absolutely Jews that are involved with AIPAC. The question isn't whether or not there are Jews who are involved in politics. Of course there are Jews involved in politics. I'm a Jew who's involved in politics, but Tucker Carlson is not an example of that. Bill O'Reilly is not an example of that. George Bush is not an example of that.
Nancy
Right?
Pelosi
I am
went in
naming
front of one of these
people
Jewish groups
who are non-Jews who
Nancy
still
Pelosi.
think this thing that, again, as a reminder,
Okay, Jews.
neither you nor I agree with.
So
Hey,
Nancy
guys,
Pelosi went in front of a Israeli meeting.
Wait. Yeah, Justin, what's up? I'm sorry.
I'm Saban. And
Wait,
she said,
Martinez.
we will support Israel.
Shh, it's
no
okay. We're
matter
asking
what,
Justin. Justin had a point to
America
say.
disappears.
Martinez, be quiet. Justin had a question to say. What's up?
I was just gonna say, try to let each other speak. You're doing a lot of talking over each
Yeah, I'm
other.
sorry.
But I'm on a phone call for work. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Go for it.
So let's well, I mean, Hollywood's controlled by Jews. I mean, we can go into that. So a Jew called Joel Stein said, Jews totally run Hollywood. I don't care if Americans think we're running the news media, Hollywood, Wall Street. I just care we get to keep running them. Lisa Mark said, as a London-born Jew living in LA for nearly 2 years.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can we go back to your last Jew? Can we go back to your last Jew? Who was she?
You're interrupting me again.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
because,
remember?
Let me finish the
because
point.
We were
you
going to let
just
each other
Let me finish the point.
Todd, this is
Lisa Mark
absurd.
says,
No,
I'm willing to like
He
let him
doesn't
go on a
wanna hear
tirade and then I go on a tirade. But the problem is
He
that
doesn't
every
wanna
single
hear
time
it.
I try to talk for like more than a second and a half, he will immediately interrupt.
Okay, we're going to
As
both
evidenced
agree,
by that explanation.
Right. We're both going to agree to let each other finish their point, and then we'll beat each other's point up after the point is made. Correct?
Fantastic. Okay.
Martinez, good.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Finish your thought, Martinez, and then Jonah, you attack his point after it's made.
All right. So the second person I was quoting said, she wrote in the Guardian newspaper, as a London-born Jew living in LA for nearly 2 years, it's the first time in my life where being Jewish is something to be publicly declared. I've never had so many friends who are Jewish, and I've never talked about being Jewish so much in my life. In London, I rarely mention my religion. Here in Hollywood, though, it appears to be one of the best calling cards in town. A guy called Elen Neharai wrote in the Times of Israel, says, we're a driven group, not just in regards to the art world. We have AIPAC, which drives policy in Washington, and it succeeds admirably. And we brag about it. Again, it's just what we do. The funny part is when an anti-Semite says it, we were up in arms. We create campaigns to take these people down. We put them out of work. We publish articles. We've created whole organizations just to tell everyone that Jews don't control anything. But let's be honest. Let's be honest here, fellow Jews. We control the media. We've got so many dudes in the executive offices in Hollywood. It's obscene. Just about every movie or TV show is rife with actors, directors, and writers who are Jewish. So these are Jews themselves bragging about this.
Okay, go ahead, Jonah.
Okay. So there's a couple of things. The first problem is this is just a problem with a general issue that I've had with this entire conversation. The idea that because there is some random dude or dudette who says this thing that Martinez thinks is bad, and that person happened to be Jewish, right? The idea that therefore we can negate like all overarching questions of who's actually holding these positions of power, to which the answer is the president has always been a Christian. Every single president has been a Christian, to which the answer is that virtually every single person on the Secretary of State level, virtually every single person at the Secretary of Defense level, virtually all of these different people have always been, and likely for the at least for the foreseeable future, will likely continue to be majority, if not exclusively, Christian, right? But I don't think that means that Christians are like some sort of like terrible, group of people who are just, trying to destroy the world. I think that simply states that, yeah, if we're talking about the people who are in the wealthiest components of our society, they are majority Christian. You'd expect them to be majority Christian. You'd expect them to be majority Christian because the majority of people in this country are Christian, and because the majority of people who have come from historically well-off positions coming into this country have also been disproportionately Christian. So if we're talking about the difference between someone who's moving into the country from Europe, where there have been for a number of reasons wealthier people historically speaking than in places like say Africa or say Asia, you'd expect disproportionately for people, or Mexico, you'd expect disproportionately for people to be wealthier. And therefore, it's not crazy that the people who are in the highest level of power are disproportionately white, disproportionately Christian, right? Now, if we're talking about Jews, similarly, Jews historically have been in this country because they were the ones who were able to escape the Holocaust, because they were the ones who were able to escape any number of forms of persecution that murdered, right, a huge proportion of Jews throughout Europe. We don't have very many Mizrahi Jews in this country. We don't have many Ethiopian Jews. We don't have many Jews from the Middle East writ large. We have majority Jews who have been who are largely Ashkenazi, who are largely coming from Europe, right? So when we're talking about that, given that, you'd expect that Jews would be wealthier than other people. If he's saying that therefore we're in control of all of Hollywood, that seems a little silly. It's not true that we control all of Hollywood. It is true that we have a disproportionate, as a percentage of like per capita level, amount of influence over Hollywood than other racial groups. That's obviously true. To negate that would be silly, right? But if we ask about why that is the case, the reason for that is largely because of who and where we were able to build up our position within European society. And the answer is that we were disproportionately made to be in these certain positions.
Okay, go ahead, Martinez.
So you're not denying that Jews have disproportionate power. You're just misdirecting to Christians, saying, oh, well, Christians have power as well. Well, Christians are the majority, as you said. So if Christians are the majority, you're going to see more Christians in positions of power. What you don't expect to see is 2% of the population controlling most of the media, controlling most of Hollywood, having the most powerful ethnic lobby in the country. Not just when it comes to foreign policy, but when it comes to domestic policy. You find Jewish lobbies like the ADL, the American Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee were instrumental in changing immigration laws in the United States to favor non-European immigration. Kevin McDonald absolutely proves in his book, Culture of Critique, that Jewish lobbyists were hell-bent on changing immigration to favor non-Europeans so that they can create a cosmopolitan melting pot society so that Jews could feel safer as a minority group, so that there's no supermajority ethnic culture that's dominant that can oppress Jews or expel them or kick them out or whatever. So this is the issue here. Jewish power is disproportionate, and it's disproportionately negative for the majority being whites. They have an agenda to promote things like social liberalism, open borders, and all of these things that undermine the white majority because they benefit as a group. And they see us as a threat. They see white people collectivized as a threat, just as they point to Hitler every time they want to justify immigration and promotion of refugees. These Jewish groups like HISE, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and other synagogues and rabbis point to the Holocaust always as their justification for promoting immigration. So this is the point here.
Yeah, so I'm just going to look at the top of the charts for music for 2021. And I just want to list off these people because I'm just curious. Because I think that what we'd find is that the number that are Black is going to be more than the 10% or 12%, whatever it is, of our country that's Black. Do you think that means that Black people have some sort of, larger than they ought to power over the music industry?
Actually, Jews have disproportionate power in the music industry.
I'm asking about black people here. So like
Blacks
Lil Nas
dominate
X
hip-hop
is
music,
really
yeah.
big, right? Right, Drake is really big. Doja Cat, Dua Lipa. These are just the top 10. Oh no, there's more than the top 10. I can go through this list, and I think it's fair to say, I don't really want to go through the list, but if you make me, I will. But the proportion of black people is higher than 12%, right?
Yeah, black people in hip hop music is definitely disproportionate. What's your point?
Yeah. So is that a problem?
Yeah, I think I don't think hip hop music's good.
Is it a problem that people that black people happen to be disproportionately involved in the music industry?
Yes, I mean I wouldn't want black people to be in the country at all.
Oh, okay, that's a little further than I thought you were going to go. Okay. If we're going to have them, if we're going to have them in the country, just humor me for a second. Is it crazy? Like, is it wrong that they would have a somewhat disproportionate effect? Let's not even go with
I think
with
Jews
black people,
are
because I
promoting
understand
black.
that. Okay, so let's not even go with black people. Let's say like Irish people. Do you hate the Irish also?
No.
Okay, cool. That's good. I'm glad. That's progressive of you. So do you think that
I think black and Jewish
if the
influence
Irish
is negative
people
for white people, yeah.
Okay, so if you think so, let's say there was an Irish proportion of people involved in the music industry that was a disproportionate, like these Ed Sheerans, right? Like, is that a problem? That there might be more Ed Sheerans in music, and there might be more. I'm trying to think of whoever it might be. There's more like Germans involved in like dance or something. Is it a problem?
Not particularly.
Okay, so why is it a problem when black people are involved or when Jews are involved? When it's not a problem when Irish or Germans are involved?
Well,
Just clarify. I mean that disproportionately. I don't mean that just in terms of like obviously
I'm a white nationalist.
involved.
So I'm a white nationalist. So I believe in ethno state. So Israel is an ethno state for Jews. I believe in an ethno state for whites.
That's not true.
And I believe that
You're just wrong.
blacks and Jews in America are a negative impact on the white population. Jews promote things that are negative for white in-group preference. They
so what do we promote?
Critical race theory and all of this anti-whiteism that we see in the media. This is being driven by cultural Marxist Jews that came out of the Frankfurt School to push an agenda to undermine the white majority.
Do you think that critical race theory is a primary component of our culture?
It's dominant in schools. It's dominant in companies. I just saw things. AT&T
have you been to a school?
And Coca-Cola are all teaching their employees to hate white people and be ashamed for being white.
Okay. Again, I'm not an expert on Coca-Cola. I don't spend that much time thinking about Coca-Cola. I just drink it. But okay. So you're concerned about Coca-Cola?
The corporations support it. The government agencies have critical race theory type programs now. Schools have it. Their parents are going to school board meetings saying they're teaching 6-year-olds to.
I don't know how we got to critical race theory. Critical race theory is Jewish now?
It came out of the Frankfurt School, which was Jewish, yes. The Frankfurt School theorists are all Jews.
Okay.
Adorno, Horkheimer, Fromm, they're all Jews. And they had Jewish motives to break down the fascistic tendencies of white society through this critical theory of pathologizing white nationalism and Christianity and anything that is kind of patriarchal. This is all part of this Marxist.
Can you define critical race theory for me really quickly?
It preaches the idea that white people are systemically privileged and that we, our skin and our race gives us advantages over black people and non-white people. That's the general thrust of it.
Wait, so aren't you a critical race theorist?
No.
Wasn't this whole conversation leading up? Wasn't this whole conversation leading up to this about how I have institutional power over you because I'm Jewish?
Well, you actually do, and whites don't. So critical race theory is wrong.
You are a critical race theorist. You're just a critical race theorist that's concerned about Jewish power rather than about white power.
Well, you could say that. I am concerned about Jewish power.
Okay, so you support critical race theory. So you do support
critical race theory is an anti-white, specifically anti-white program.
No, critical race theory is just a theory.
that
right?
preaches
You just
it
defined
is an
critical race theory. It was a
anti-white
pretty good
theory.
definition, actually. Your definition of critical race theory was a concern about institutional, not interpersonal, but institutional power of certain groups over other groups, right? So you do
Yeah, and
support critical race theory.
it never talks about Jewish privilege and Jewish power, and it only talks
It
about white people.
absolutely does. What
No,
are you
it
talking
doesn't.
about?
Where is
never
critical race theory talking about Jews being
in the
powerful and
context
privileged?
in the
It never
context where,
says anything
we
about
have
that.
power and privilege. So places like Israel, where we have power and privilege
So
over people who are non-Jewish.
But in none of these companies are they telling Jewish people to feel guilty
Because those
for being
companies are in the
Jews.
United States,
And
where there's
plenty of Jews in the United States, but they don't talk about
correct.
Jews.
But look, if you're
It's an
concerned
attack
that
on white
if
people.
your concern is that the critical race theory being taught in schools is the wrong kind of critical race theory, that's an interesting perspective. It's not the general conservative perspective, which is that we shouldn't be teaching critical race theory. But if that's your perspective, at least it's a coherent perspective. But it does mean that you support critical race theory.
I support the truth, which is that Jews are massively overrepresented in our media, government.
Okay, so
and
you support critical
academia,
race theory.
and
You're
that they're
describing
using their
critical race
power
theory.
to destroy
Martinez,
white people.
I just want you to say that you are describing critical race theory, because what you are describing is critical race theory.
Now, what I'm describing are facts that Jews are powerful and that they use their power for their own benefit.
Critical race theory. You're describing ways that Jews have institutional power,
right, but critical
through
race
our
theory
privilege as a certain racial group. You're describing
okay,
critical race theory.
It's a pro-white version of it, you could say.
Okay. So you're not opposed to critical race theory being taught in schools. You just want it to be a pro-white version of critical race theory.
Well, okay. Let's have a pro-white version of critical race theory.
Awesome.
Be taught in schools,
So you're
but
not
it'll
opposed to
never
critical race
happen.
theory. Awesome.
It'll never happen. It'll never happen because
so you're not
Jews
opposed to critical race theory.
Our governments.
Okay, so you're not opposed to critical race theory. So that was the first thing that you had, that you were concerned about Jews influencing society, but you're not actually opposed to it. You're just opposed to it because you're concerned that it's not intensely pro-white enough, and you want it to be more intensely pro-white.
Jewish power is anti-white. Jewish power is opposed to white people having a homeland, but they want a homeland in Israel just for their people, right?
When people are trying to teach what's going on in this country, sometimes we teach that white people have power, and you don't want to hear that. All you want to hear is that Jews are the only racial group that have power in the United States. That's all you want to hear. And any other versions of critical race theory that might be discussing other contexts of other forms of power that might exist in this country.
Because white people don't have any power.
This country.
White people don't have any power. White people are on the chopping block. It's white people who are getting discriminated against through affirmative action.
Is being president power?
BLM
is
rioters beating white people down. Yeah.
Is being president power?
Joe Biden is anti-white. Joe Biden said in 2015 that he wants to flood the country with immigration until white's a minority.
Is being president power?
It is, yeah.
Okay. How many presidents have been white, and how many have been non-white?
It doesn't matter.
I thought we just said that being president is power. You were saying that whites don't have any power in this country. But all but one of the presidents in this country have been white.
White people who are pro-white don't have power in this country. White nationalists have absolutely no power. The white guy in power, is anti-white. He hates white people. He's always talking about white supremacy. He supports mass immigration. He's opening the borders. He's pro-BLM. His vice president is Kamala Harris, a black woman who supports BLM and hates white people.
Gotcha. Do you think that there was ever a time in our history of our country where white people had power?
Yeah, there was.
Okay. So like, for example, when there was redlining, that was power?
Yeah, whites used to have political power in America.
So redlining would be an example of power?
You could say so, yeah.
Okay. Was, I assume you'd grant that slavery was a kind of power?
Yeah, white people used to be the dominant force in America, and now they are not. Now they're the opposite of that.
So I guess my confusion is when you talk about the power of Jews, you're talking about our fiscal power, you're talking about our educational power. That's power that has resulted from who was able to be in the country, who like demographically Jews are in the United States today because of who was able to get certain benefits from the families that were able to get out of Germany, out of Poland, right? So I am the beneficiary of a bunch of power that I got because of the kinds of educational benefits that my grandparents had in Poland, right? and the fact that they were able to escape prior to the Holocaust, and that they didn't lose their lives.
What's your point?
Right?
I mean,
my point is this: if we're talking about the Jewish institutional power, and we're talking about that institutional power as a result of previous power, a result of previous education, previous financial value, and then we're talking about redlining, you said yes is in fact a benefit, is in fact an example of white power. I don't understand how we can't call it white power that you would be the beneficiary of that white power of the past.
White power has been completely eroded since the 1960s when Jewish activists created all those 1960s acts like the
So you're concerned
the
that you have
Immigration
less
Act,
or
the
that you have
Voting
none?
Rights Act, the anti-segregationist bill, all of that was run by Jewish activists.
Do you think that you have less
and they were running the
institutional power?
NAACP?
Do you think you have less
And-
institutional
and
power, or do you think you have
these
no
Jews-
institutional power?
White people have absolutely no
Why
institutional
are you
power
not answering the
whatsoever.
question?
Just let him finish. and then he'll answer.
White people,
Okay, fine.
white people are on the chopping block. White people being demographically replaced in their own nations across the West. America is only 58% white now, going down every year, and the president says it's a great thing that this is happening. And you want to tell me about institutional power? I just saw a thing about how 30% of white university students now tried to identify as non-white on the application so they can get the benefits, the loans that are focused on minorities. So if white people are so privileged, why is Elizabeth Warren pretending she's an Indian? Why are all these white people pretending they're not white to get into college and get all the loans? It's the opposite, right? We're being lectured about our privilege and power.
Yeah, if
this
you
is
want
a
to
way
argue,
to undermine
Martinez,
white
if you
people
want to
and
get,
demoralize white people.
I'll make a deal with
That's the
you.
whole
I'll
point.
make a deal with you. Okay, from one racial group to another. Here's my deal. My deal is the following: if we get rid of legacy admissions, if we get rid of sports scholarships, which disproportionately go to white people as well, then yeah, we can totally get rid of the admissions benefit that people get for being black or for being whatever it might be, being a woman, right?
Well, how about
legit.
it's done by merit? It should be by merit.
I agree.
But-
So let's get rid of
but
legacy
it's not.
admissions. So let's get rid of legacy admissions.
Yeah, but right now it's all of it.
Are you in favor of getting rid of legacy admissions?
How do you define that?
Legacy admissions will have a benefit. If your parent went to Harvard, you have a benefit in trying to get into Harvard. Should we get rid of that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Should we get rid of sports scholarships?
I don't know. I mean, this is stupid, man. I don't
If
know
you
what
want
we're
to have
talking
an
about.
actually like equal playing field for this kind of stuff, we should have it be an equal playing field.
How
So
about
should we get rid of that?
how about we have an equal playing field by sending Jews to Israel where they can be with their people? Israel is the
It's
Jewish
just a
state.
fantastical, like
It's
it's
an
difficult even to
ethno-state.
grapple when you say
It's
something
an
that is as silly
ethno-state,
as like
and
let's
yet
get rid of
Jews-
all of the blacks and Jews from the United
Jews
States.
don't want to go live in their own
statement.
ethno-state,
It's
right?
yeah. It's
Netanyahu
almost
says,
like people don't like
Netanyahu said
ethno-states. It's almost,
Netanyahu
Martinez,
said that
it's almost
Israel
like-
is a state
it's
just
almost
for
like
Jewish
this.
people.
When you describe
He
every
passed a
single
law for this.
Okay, I'm going to take my turn.
And
now. I'm gonna take my
Netanyahu,
turn. You've had
it's
your
not
turn.
your
I'm gonna
turn.
take my turn.
You've been talking for
It is my
5
turn.
minutes.
It's my
You've
turn.
been talking for 5
It's
minutes,
almost- this
and
is
then
a
as soon
lie.
as I talk for 30 seconds, you interrupt me.
It's almost like the following is the case.
No.
It's almost like-
It's
it's
my
almost
turn
like-
to speak.
it's
my turn
almost
to
like
speak.
white
All right,
people.
we're
my
back
turn
to
to speak.
we're back
Okay.
to talking over each other.
I agree with this.
So
He
the last
speaks for
time-
5
hold on,
minutes.
the last
he speaks
time
for
that this
5
happened-
minutes,
Hold
and then
on.
I speak for
The
30
last-
seconds.
the
and then
last
you
two
interrupt.
Correct.
times that this
We'll
happened-
move into Jonah. Hold on. We
Yeah.
can move into timed responses that we
Let's
have
do
to.
it.
I really don't want to do that, but we can.
We
What
can.
do we want to
Let's do
agree
that.
on? 1
Yeah.
minute? We want to
Sure,
do 1
a
minute
minute.
back and forth.
Okay.
All right, great.
Awesome.
I'm going to put up the 30 seconds. When your 30 seconds is
Cool.
up, the 30 seconds will come down. The next person will go on. All right?
Okay. It's almost like the number of people, when you're describing this kind of fantastical idea of let's just have this ethno state, and you're describing every single white person who doesn't want that, which is, the majority of white people. You're describing every single Jew who doesn't want that, which is, the majority of Jewish people. When you're describing every single black, all of these different racial groups that don't want that, when you describe them as anti-white, when you describe them as anti-Jewish, anti-black, whatever it might be, this is insane. Okay, if we're talking about benefiting Jewish people or benefiting white people or benefiting, Muslims or Sikhs or whatever it might be, it suggests that the vast majority of white people think that they benefit from having not just white people exist in this country, right? The fact that Biden and the fact that all of these different people who you think are like, bashing the white history or whatever it is, that they all are white and still agree that we should have a multicultural society, that might just be the correct answer.
Multicultural society doesn't benefit white people. It only benefits Jews and non-Europeans who they're using as a shield to create this cosmopolitan internationalist liberalism so that they can be prosperous, so that they can avoid any kind of pushback or competition from a dominant group. And this is what Jewish activists themselves have said when they're lobbying for immigration. They want to prevent another Hitler. And to prevent another Hitler, they need to mix us up, mash us up, and race mix us and miscegenate us so that there's no dominant white identity. They hate white identity. They want to get rid of white identity. They've pathologized white identity vis-a-vis the critical race theory, all of this academic nonsense, Robin DiAngelo and all this, white privilege talk. This is designed to demoralize white people, to get them ready, to prepare them for this demographic replacement that is rapidly happening and that the politicians themselves are supporting. The Biden, the president himself, said it's a great thing that whites are becoming a minority. And many other politicians in Europe have said this as well. So why should white people go along with this? It's nonsense.
Go ahead, Jonah.
Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about this sort of, you're saying white replacement, which I think is a silly term. It's not like we're like going around genociding white people, right? That has been done to Jews in the past. That has been done to black people in the past. That has been done to a whole host of people in the past, right? But that's not what you're talking about. What you're talking about is there are going to be more black people in the country. There are going to be more Jewish people, whatever it might be, in the country, in addition to the white people. The question isn't whether or not black people or Jewish people or Muslim people or Hispanic, whatever it might be, are benefiting from that. The question is whether or not it is harming white people or if everyone is better off. And the answer is that everyone's better off. If we look at the overall GDP per capita in this country and compare it to 60 years ago, we are overall better from a financial perspective. If we're thinking about health outcomes, we are overall better. It's not just that we're helping black people, we're helping everyone. It's not that we're just helping Hispanic people by, getting more, better access to food, for example. We're helping everyone. We're not just helping, right? All of this, you seem to be looking at this as like a zero-sum game, and it's just not a zero-sum game. It's just not true.
Okay, go ahead.
It's helping non-whites to bring them here, and they're benefiting from living amongst us. It doesn't help white people to have non-Europeans flood into their countries, rapidly transform their countries into these melting pot societies that have no identity whatsoever. That there's nothing to really get together with anyone else when your neighbor's a different race than you, a different religion than you. There's nothing to bring them together. There's no glue that holds that society together. It will fracture, and it is fracturing. We're seeing it fracture on racial lines with BLM, with all of these immigrant groups coming in and identifying more with their group or even their foreign country that they came from. They wave the Mexican flag and the Pakistani flag. They're more loyal to their foreign nations than the ones they're coming to. Only white people are losing in this scenario. Jews are benefiting and non-Europeans are benefiting. And you're saying white people have to just sit down and take this and accept it. But then Israel gets to be a Jewish ethno-state that kicks out the African migrants, and Jews get to have this double standard, but white people are told that we're Nazis if we want to have our own land for our own people.
Yeah, so first of all, you're just incorrect on Israel. The number of Ethiopian Jews, it's like Mizrahi represent like 49% of all Jews. Yes, but they're African Jews. The idea that there are no. Okay, I thought we were not interrupting each other.
Just let him finish. I'm timing.
Yeah. The idea that there are not even Muslims, that there are Muslim Arabs, is also not true. It's like 17.9% of all people in Israel proper, let alone in the Gaza Strip, let alone in the West Bank, are non-Jewish Arab. So that's also just not true. There are Arabs who are in the current majority control over the Knesset in Israel. So that's just silly. I lost my train of thought, and also I have limited time left. So you can just take your next step. Go for it.
So Netanyahu, he passed a nation-state law in Israel, I think a few years ago. And this basically says that Israel, he defines it as a Jewish state that needs to sustain its Jewish majority. Netanyahu also said that Arabs are a demographic threat to Israel's demographics. And he says that if there's too many Palestinians moving in and becoming Israeli, that they will overrun the Jewish population, and that Jews will lose control of their state. So they know damn well that demographics is destiny. Many Israeli politicians say this all the time. There was a poll that came out of the Times of Israel that said 52% of Israelis believe African migrants are a cancer. There are numerous Israeli politicians like Miri Regev went to protests and said this, that African migrants are a cancer to Israel and they're a threat to the Jewish state, the Jewish nature of the state. They don't recognize mixed marriages in Israel. They have an Arab population, but they're very concerned about that population growing. There's many examples of Israeli politicians calling for Arabs to, be expelled, or their birth rates to be quelled, and so on. So
Okay.
Israel absolutely is a Jewish state.
Yeah, go ahead. And guys, you guys got to send in questions. We have a hard time, 6 o'clock ending.
Yeah, sorry.
Eastern
Yeah, go
time,
ahead. Go
so
ahead with those questions, by the way.
I don't have
Yeah.
many. That's what I'm going to tell
I'm
them.
happy-
So send them in now, and then we're going to do closing after the questions. But it's mostly just troll questions, so we're not going to read those on air. And if anything, we can end
I'm ready.
a little earlier.
I want all the troll
Jonah, I don't think you want the questions that have been coming in.
No, I do. I want
you do.
every single
Okay,
one.
well, I'll read
Fuck
some
yeah.
of them for you, brother. But
Yeah, do it.
So go ahead. No, we're gonna go ahead. We'll finish.
Yeah. So to the idea that there
Right.
have been disgusting laws, and there even continue to be disgusting laws in Israel, you're obviously right. There are disgusting laws in Israel. And you've named some of them. You're correct. And to the idea that there are racists in Israel, that there are Jewish supremacists in Israel who don't want for Black people, who don't want for Muslim people to come into the country. Yeah, that's disgusting and it's wrong. I don't believe in ethno-states. You clearly do believe in ethno-states. If you do believe in ethno-states, I don't see why you have a problem with that. Kind of confusing to me. But yeah, I just don't think that you're correct. The majority of Jews in this country, or the majority of Blacks or white people in this country, want to see an ethno-state in the United States. With that, I can count that as my closing statement. If you want to do a closing statement, I'm ready for questions.
Well, I don't oppose Jews sustaining their state as an ethno-state. I'm just pointing out the enormous double standards of Jews. So Jews in America vote Democrat or social liberals. They love immigration. The largest ethnic group that supports immigration. They were behind the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. And so this is the ADL, for example, says it's actually it shouldn't be imposed on Israel to become a multicultural state, that this would destroy Zionism. And then at the same time, the ADL supports unlimited refugees, and they're completely to the left on this in America. So it just shows the duality of the Jewish mind. It's in Israel, they understand that being a majority is beneficial for them, but being in America, white people being majority doesn't benefit Jews. So they have a completely opposite agenda there. So I guess I just close by saying that we've been told that Jews are victims and that they have been chased out of countries for no reason whatsoever, but there are definitely reasons for these things. The persecution of Jews was not just simply people irrationally hating them. It was because of Jewish influence and power and how they wield that against Gentiles. The chief rabbi of Israel said, "Goyim were only born to serve us. Without that, they have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel." This is the mentality of many Jews who have significant control over our media, governments, and academia, and are using it against almost exclusively white people today.
All right. Well, thank you. As I said, there's not many questions, so they're mostly just statements. I'll read a few of them. At Lionheart said, Henry Ford warned us about the Jews, not Zionism. We have Hugh Chungle, who said that Kufi's revenue in 2017 was 1.7 million, and that APAC's revenue in 2014 was 77 million.
That's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant.
Again, I didn't fact check that one. Just comments coming in. There's literally
Wait,
one question.
I do want to respond to that one. That's completely irrelevant. What matters is voters. We live in a republic. What matters is voters. What matters is where those voters live. If we're talking about the places that actually decide the presidential election, we're talking about the Rust Belt. I happen to live in the Rust Belt. I am Jewish, but the majority of people who have the institutional power to affect change, which is people in the Rust Belt, are people. Those are the swing states, to clarify. There are people who are Christians, and so Kufi has a significantly larger amount of influence because they have a significantly larger amount of people who are in their voting block within those places that matter. Okay.
Crusader 110 wanted to know: is he going to deny Jews run Hollywood? And obviously, that's for you, Joan.
I don't know what it means to like run Hollywood. I think that the Jews have outsized influence in Hollywood. I also think that like the what are they called? The Scientologists, they also have outsized influence in Hollywood. I'm not concerned about like the Scientologists destroying America. I think Scientologists are a little silly sometimes, but I'm not concerned about them destroying America. And I also am not concerned about Jews destroying America because what's his name? Tom Cruise exists, or because Mel Brooks exists. Yeah.
Martinez, do you want to take that?
Yeah. I mean, Jewish domination of Hollywood is an absolute fact. Jews themselves boast of this fact, and you can just see from the content of Hollywood how Jewish influence affects it. Holocaust movies are just enormous. They're ubiquitous. There's always a Holocaust movie. This anti-Nazi stuff.
How dare there be anti-Nazi?
This is Jewish
propaganda.
imposition. This is Jewish imposition on a Gentile population. They're trying to promote like sympathetic images of Jews. And
wait, are you pro-Nazi?
Stephen Steinlight said that.
Wait. Are you pro-Nazi?
Hang on, don't interrupt me, man. What are you?
I thought we were no longer taking turns.
I thought we're no longer interrupting people, but you don't.
Yeah. Are you pro-Nazi?
So hang on a second.
Pro-Nazi?
Stephen Steinlight said this. So
my answer is no. I'm not pro-Nazi.
He'll answer you.
Just let him.
He will be truthful. He advocates for an ethno state, so I don't think that he will not answer you honestly. Let him finish, and he'll answer.
Okay. Stephen Steinlight says it's true that Jewish economic influence and power disproportionately concentrated in Hollywood television and news industry, theoretically a boon in terms of the formation of favorable public images of Jews and sensitizing the American people to issues of concern to Jews. So they're using this media as propaganda to justify their agendas, whether it's a war in Iraq, whether it's mass immigration, whether it's LGBT. They are using this to harm us.
Okay, back to my question. Do you support propaganda that is opposed to the Holocaust?
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe the official story of the Holocaust.
But that's not what I asked. I asked, like, do you think it's okay to make a movie that is anti-Holocaust?
Of course, but Jews won't allow that.
No. Anti-Holocaust, as in like you oppose the Holocaust. So like I think number one that the Holocaust happened, and number two that it was like bad that the Holocaust happened. If I make a movie and my movie has this sort of overarching theme of like Holocaust bad, is that a problem that I made a movie that said Holocaust bad?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I'm ready for the next question.
What you're doing, I would outlaw any of that.
You'd outlaw
Jewish. Yeah.
Oh my
Jewish
God.
Influence.
Outlaw. I didn't realize
Jewish
that part.
influence. Okay. Jewish influence in Hollywood is designed to promote white guilt, and I would get rid of it completely.
Okay. I didn't know that you were personally guilty of the Holocaust. I thought that when you said the Holocaust was bad, I didn't think you were guilty of that.
Movies,
but if you think you are, that's interesting.
Movies in Israel, right?
Okay. I don't live in Israel. I live in America. I believe in a pluralistic society. I think that people should be able to live in
like every
America
Jew does,
if they were born in America.
Because it benefits your group to do that. It doesn't benefit my group.
It does, though, from a fiscal perspective, it does. From a cultural perspective, it does. Yeah, really? I do care about money. I care about people having access to housing, which is money. I care about people having access to food, which is money. I care about people having access to education, which is money, and healthcare, which is money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm ready for the next question.
White people having access to that.
Okay, I'm ready for the next question.
All right. Next one is from Handsome Truth. He says volcano, and that means you're going into volcano, Jonah. That's not me. That's from Handsome Truth. Volcano.
Should I respond? Wait. I want to
you
respond
can.
to each.
Sure, go
I want to
ahead.
respond to each and every single one of these. I'm very excited. Okay. I think that is unlikely. I don't have any sort of like intense sort of like response, but I think it is unlikely that I will end up in a volcano. Anyway, continue.
All right. Let's see here. It says Jews get presidents who are usually a part of a secret organization like the Freemasons to do their bidding. Lots of presidents have been Freemasons. Freemasonry at its core is about Judaism and rebuilding the temple. Obviously,
Yes.
that's for you, Jonah.
Yes, I agree. I think every single Christian president has been a secret Jew. I think this is completely correct and not even remotely absurd. I agree.
Well, every president is subservient to Jews since
Yes, they're secret Jews.
you know, for at
All
least
of them.
100 years.
Yes, Andrew Jackson, secret Jew. I
Lyndon
agree.
Johnson, no, they're not secret Jews. They can be influenced by Jews by these lobby groups, which you admit are powerful.
Why don't we just have a
It doesn't
Jewish
matter
president?
what their ethnic background is.
Why don't we
when
just have a
Jews
Jewish
can
president?
buy 'em
If
off.
we want to have a Jewish president, we could just do it, right?
Well, Bernie Sanders almost became president. He's a Jew.
But he didn't, right?
But he could have. He was close to it.
How many presidents have been Jewish? 0.
Doesn't matter. They don't need to be Jewish to be Zionist. Joe Biden himself
Right,
said.
that's what I said earlier.
Guess what Joe Biden said? Guess what Joe Biden said? Joe Biden said.
And the influence
Biden
of
said
non-Jewish
In an interview, Joe Biden said, "You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist." And then he says, "I'm a Zionist," right? So you don't have to be a Jew to support Jewish
almost
agenda.
like It's almost like there are reasons to support the state of Israel that extend beyond just you're a Jew, right? It's almost like there are other reasons that we might want to have a strong ally in the Middle East, which has, crucial trade influence across the totality. Yeah.
An ally that spies on America, steals their secrets, attacks their boats like the USS Liberty, cheers when 9/11 happened, says it's great.
Five people that you found five people.
Netanyahu
found 5 people. You found
Ariel
5
Sharon
people.
said it was great. The Israeli security establishment
found 5
was a Hanukkah miracle for Israel.
You found 5 people who said bad things on 9/11.
Why is that?
I imagine that there were a bunch of people who said some shitty stuff following 9/11.
They arrested 200 Israelis in the run up to 9/11. And they were doing all kinds of spying.
I'm just not equipped to have the 9/11 talk because I just don't know anything about your conspiracy theories there. I'm sorry.
You really don't know.
You're right.
Anything.
I don't spend my free time focusing on 9/11 truth or experience, whatever it is. You're
looking into who's running our countries into the ground.
Yeah. Wouldn't I be part of that? Whatever, doesn't matter. Next question.
The chat did allege you were Mossad. I did see that as well, Jonah. So you are Mossad.
I am Mossad.
You are Mossad. Here's the one legit question.
Justin, stop! You're showing favoritism. You can't.
Justin might be too. We're gonna get a 23andMe on Justin as well, or he's heading into volcano.
I am Mossad.
Brittany is half going into volcano. Her HD as well. Here's the one real question that we did get.
Yeah.
Why? And it says why Israel is not taking immigrants. That's how it came in. That's not me butchering it, although my verbiage isn't great. And those few blacks they sterilize. So I guess they're saying that they sterilize the blacks in Israel. So both.
Yeah. So I don't know about sterilization, but I think that there are a lot of problems with Israeli immigration policy. I think the largest problem is that there are a lot of Arabs who were forced out of the country or felt that they were forced out of the country at the time of the founding of the country, and I think therefore that the result has been that there are a lot of people who are living, particularly in Jordan, disproportionately. And let's keep in mind, of course, that the Jordanian population, and specifically the Jordanian government, more even than the population, has made a very explicit and intentional decision to not allow those people to be a part of broader Jordanian society in order to keep them in refugee camps, in order to have sort of something to hold against Israel. So that's certainly part of the story, but it's also part of the story that Israel really is at fault for a large proportion of that, and they should definitely allow those people back into the country. Beyond that, I do think that broadly speaking, immigration should be in defense of the people who are already a part of the country. Those people, I think, that are an exception because those people are part of the country as historically defined, and so that because they were forced out, they have a right to return. But I don't think that is the case of every single person who might possibly want to go into to live in the country. I think that's true specifically of the people who have a right to return, which is to say those Muslims and is to say the Jews. That is yeah, go for it.
So Benjamin Netanyahu, a few years ago, he built a fence around Israel, and he says, we have to keep out the wild beasts. Okay, so these Jews in Israel, they're supremacists, right? They want to have their ethno state. They don't like Arabs. They don't like blacks. They don't even like the black Jews. And these Jews in Israel can get away with this kind of thing. Imagine a white politician said that, right? Look how much crap Donald Trump got just for saying that some Mexicans are rapists. You know, he gets
president,
the entire media establishment, you know, was shitting on Trump because of his stance against illegal immigrants. But Netanyahu can say something like that, and he gets welcomed into the Congress. He gets standing ovations when he gives speeches. The foreign aid continues to flow to Israel. This is the huge double standard. Jews clearly have privileges that others don't have. They can be racist, but they don't want you to be a racist if you're white.
Okay. Question from Cracking Crypsis. Why is being pro-white in America stigmatized? A question for both, obviously.
I've been taking them first. Go for it.
Go ahead, Martinez.
It's stigmatized because of these Jewish campaigns going back to the Frankfurt School, going back to people like Franz Boas and Lewontin and all of these Jewish anthropologists that push this idea that we're all the same, we're all equal, that there's no differences between the races. The American Jewish Committee, the ADL, they have promoted that in the government to adopt that position when they were passing the 1965 Immigration Act. And then you have these critical race theorists entering into the colleges and universities to stigmatize white identity and white self-interest and white political campaigning. They don't want white people to form a united bloc in the country. They want blacks to do it, right? With BLM, they want Hispanics to do it, and Jews can do it, but it's only whites that are unable to form a cohesive group and have an in-group preference because it's a threat to the Jewish elite that wants to supplant the previous WASP white elite. And they largely have succeeded in doing that, but we're seeing white people kind of rise up from that and coming together and forming a collective identity. So they have to kick it back in and put the genie back in the bottle. That's what they're doing today.
I'm sorry, I spaced out. What was the question again?
About why being pro-white is stigmatized.
Why is it? Yeah, I think that the definition of pro-white as defined by Martinez is stigmatized because it's stupid. But I don't think that being pro-white writ large is stigmatized at all. I think that it's pro-white, for example, to be in support of like healthcare for white people, which will disproportionately help white people. I think it's pro-white to support education, which is something that's going to disproportionately help white people because white people are the majority of the country. I think it's pro-white to suggest that you want to. I mean, he was laughing earlier at the idea that we should like try to be in a more stable financial situation than we were 60 years ago. And he thought that was just like my Judaizing influence that was trying to support people having money. But yeah, I do think that it's good for white people to have money. And I think that it's better to have money and it's better to have cheap prices for things. And it's better to have a whole host of things that are all benefited and will help white people. And I don't think that helping white people definitionally and all the time will come at the cost of non-whites.
All right. Question from Abolish BlackRock and Vanguard. How do you explain that BlackRock...
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that name? I just want to hear that name again.
Abolish BlackRock and Vanguard.
Okay,
we'll get to it in the question because he actually mentions that.
Fantastic.
Okay. How do you explain that BlackRock and Vanguard, both Jewish mega corporations, control 85% of the world's finance and economy, including news, schools, health systems, government, and are slowly pushing a communist agenda?
Yeah, BlackRock is part of this agenda to buy up all of the houses, right? They're doing this huge spree where they're buying up all like houses that can accommodate families, nuclear families. They don't want white people forming nuclear families and living in the suburbs. They want to push everybody into these little pod cities. And this is part of this global great reset agenda that all these corporations and governments are now promoting. So yes, Jewish financial power and Wall Street is complicit with this great reset plan. And it really just comes down to this idea that a white nuclear family is kind of the bedrock of what they think will incubate fascism or Nazism, right? And so they have to smash that.
Okay, Jonah.
Yeah, so BlackRock is just an investment management organization. Yeah, rich people will give to other rich people to invest their money. I don't understand, like, the idea that BlackRock, so to clarify, BlackRock doesn't actually like own that much of anything. They're just the ones who are responsible for managing other people's wealth. And so the idea that they're the ones who are actually in control of things rather than the people who are giving them the money, which is overwhelmingly Christian, is a little silly. The idea that even that BlackRock is a majority Jewish organization is also silly. Yes, it's true that Larry Fink is the I don't know if he was the founder, but he's the CEO of it, and he's personally Jewish. But the idea that therefore means that the entire organization is Jewish is silly. Does that mean that like all of Google, because Larry Page or whoever the fuck the founders are, were Christian, that therefore all of Google is
well,
Christian?
what's interesting. No, but it means that Jews have a disproportionate influence and control over the institution if they're the CEO of it. So if like
you earlier said that the president doesn't have institutional power.
Martinez
So the
Perspective.
CEO,
because the president,
you're right.
because the president George W. Bush was a dumbass. He didn't make any of his own decisions.
Larry
He
is
just
a
followed whatever.
dumbass.
But in any case, Facebook, for example, most of the people there are Jewish. Zuckerberg and the rest of them, and they banned white nationalism and Holocaust denial from Facebook. Do you think that had nothing to do with him?
Yeah, I agree.
That was dumb. Nothing to do with him being Jewish, though. Clearly, he has a Jewish.
No, it has nothing to do with him being Jewish, because the same thing has been done in Google, which is not a Jewish company. It's not Jewish run. Who's the CEO? Larry Page is.
Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They created Google. They're both Jewish.
Are they Jewish? Larry Page is really.
They're both Jewish. Yes, they are. Of course, they are.
Okay, while you look that up, I'll read the next question. Politically provoked from Crusader 110. Were you done, Jonah? I don't want to.
Yeah, go for it. That's fine.
Okay, Crusader 110. Why can't we have this debate on YouTube when a professor of Rutgers, I guess he meant at Rutgers, just called for the mass murder of white people, openly faced no repercussions, and the video is still up on YouTube?
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. YouTube bans anyone who's a white nationalist or a right winger or a so-called anti-Semite, but they allow Zionists on there. They allow black supremacists. They allow anti-whites a voice. That's clear proof of a bias of YouTube and all these big companies to censor the far right and censor white nationalism, but allow all these other racial groups and activists, so long as they're not white and so long as pretty much they're anti-white.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. It's dumb that there is censorship on YouTube. There shouldn't be. I think that it's a real problem. I think it's in opposition to the First Amendment. I don't think that these public square organizations should be able to do that. I think that there are two different kinds of things that exist in sort of the publishing space. There's publishers and there's printers. So if we're going to think about a printer, right, you don't get to decide as HP what I do and do not print with your printer. If you are something like the New York Times, you absolutely do get to decide what's going to be printed in the New York Times. There's a huge difference, though, which is that I can hold New York Times accountable from a legal perspective for what is said by their writers. You do not want, Google does not want, Facebook does not want, any of these companies don't want for people to be able to hold them legally accountable for what is and is not said on their site. And therefore, I think that they should not be able to decide who is and is not allowed to be on their site. Yeah.
Oh, right. Why do you think? I mean, Susan Wojcicki, she's the person in charge of the censorship on YouTube. She's Jewish. She referenced how some of her family died in World War II and the Holocaust. Why is it that only right wingers or far right or white nationalists are kicked off YouTube, but not black nationalists or Jewish nationalists? Why only white nationalists?
Probably fiscal reasons. It's probably in their
Jewish
fiscal
reasons.
It's probably fiscally in their interest to do what. Well, first of all, they have a legal obligation to do what's in their fiscal interest. So this is that is the case. It is for fiscal reasons.
Why would it be for fiscal reasons to kick off?
Because Google is a publicly traded company, and they have a legal obligation to do what is in the interest of the shareholders, right?
So it's in the interest of the shareholders to allow anti-white speech, but not allow pro-white speech.
Yeah, because it's good for advertising. Yeah.
But doesn't that prove that the culture itself is dominated by people who are anti-white?
It's broadly the culture is a culturally complicated sort of country, right? We are not a country that wants to be white supremacist or wants to be black supremacist. So you would likely see, if there was a black supremacist organization that was as important as yours, you'd likely see that them getting censored as well. The history of this country is a history of you can doubt it, but there's just like
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a black supremacist organization.
No, it's not. They're not trying to go for black separatism in the same way that you're trying to go for white separatism. It's not
pretty
true.
much they are. Pretty much
it's
they
not
are.
True.
They
If you look at someone like
white cops out of
if you
their
look at someone like Louis
neighborhoods,
Farrakhan, if you look at someone like Louis Farrakhan is an example of a black nationalist. Louis Farrakhan is not allowed on like any of these sites.
Actually,
right?
Louis Farrakhan was still on Twitter last time I checked.
Yeah, okay,
So
and Nick Fuentes was too. The idea, my point though is the broad black nationalist organizations would have the same complaints that you do, right? Because they are just as you are. An example of someone who is broadly, I mean this in no way disrespectfully, but broadly anti-American, right? Broadly in opposition to that which is the American hegemonic view.
There's no equivalent opprobrium against black nationalists or Jewish nationalists as there is against white.
There aren't as many Jewish nationalists.
Because
there aren't as many Jewish nationalists in this country as there are white nationalists.
And they support anti-whiteism and they're sympathetic to Zionism and Jewish nationalism.
They support anti-whiteism. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I think we're going to do one more question. It's to Jonah, and then because I know Jonah, you have I
have a hard out at 6.
You have a Mossad meeting you have to get to. Correct?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And then
I'll be exactly right.
Yeah.
Plotting the downfall of the Goyim.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
At least you mentioned. No, seriously, thank you very much, guys. I'm sorry Brittany wasn't here. She's been going through some shit. Justin had to work, and so anyway, I really do appreciate it.
You did well.
I'm gonna read this. Well, yeah, I'm more of an antagonist, not really a host, but anyway.
No, I appreciate your antagonism.
I do. Yeah, I think I'm good at the antagonism.
I agree.
All right, so this last question is for Jonah. And again, the language is not me.
Justin, stop judging me.
Play victim card for
of course not.
Cough, not the Homodor. Why kikes do not speak about communist leaders being Jewish? And again,
I'm sorry.
Can you
start that from the beginning?
I'll start from the beginning, but again, this is from Oofman.
I'm ready,
Question for
Oofman.
Jonah: why Jews play victim card for Holocaust? Cough, not Homodor, which is the I think it was 32 or 31 and 32 in Ukraine, and why kikes do not speak about communist leaders being Jewish? Question mark. It makes no sense. Yeah,
can you put this on the screen so I can read through it?
No, we don't have any. I would.
Yeah, he's talking about the Holodomor.
I just want to hear that. I just want to understand what they're. Wait, say it again.
Yeah, I'll read it again.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Why Jews play victim card, not the victim card, for Holocaust, which he means the Holocaust.
The Holocaust,
and not the Homodor. I won't read the rest of it, but what he says is, what about the communist leaders
both are
being
bad.
Jewish? So during those times, I guess
both are bad.
The Bolsheviks.
Yeah, so both are bad. If we're talking about like the USSR, they are pretty explicitly atheistic, like violently atheistic. They like killed many, mostly Christians actually, but also Jews, as part of trying to get the USSR running. And that's like a serious problem. And I am very much not an atheist. Atheists are silly. Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. Atheists are silly, and also atheists did some bad things, and they shouldn't.
Yeah, but you're actually not really getting to the point here, because Jews can be atheists. You can be a Jew and be an atheist. David Ben Gurion, who founded Israel, he was an atheist.
He can be ethnically Jewish.
Many Jews today are atheists, but they still identify as Jews, and this is what was true of the communist Jews like Leon Trotsky and Karl Radek and Lazar Kaganovich and Zinoviev and Kamenev, and a lot of the top officials of Stalin were Jewish, and they committed atrocities. But nobody, 85%, Putin said this, he said 85% of the original Bolshevik regime was Jewish. The Holodomor was organized by Lazar Kaganovich, who was Jewish. And there's an article I remember a few years ago, a Jewish group objected to the Ukrainian government bringing forth like a case against the people who perpetrated the Holodomor. And it said a Jewish group in Ukraine is objecting to the criminal case of the Great Famine because most of the names on the list were Jewish. The list of perpetrators were Jewish. And so Jews were in an uproar trying to get this list, thrown out because of the Jewish names on it. So the Israeli president,
okay.
Shimon Peres, went over to Ukraine and he said, "Forget about history, Ukrainians. Don't worry about history." But then Jews, force feed us.
The Holodomor was bad. The Holocaust was also bad. I think that it's okay for people to make movies about how the Holodomor was bad. I don't think that should be illegal. Martinez thinks that it should be illegal to make movies about how the Holocaust was bad. Yeah.
No, you can make them in Israel.
Right. So long as, okay. Yeah. So you can't make them here. That makes sense. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And not even remotely absurd. Yeah. Is there one more question or should I?
No, that's it. We're gonna bounce out. Martinez.
All right, sweet.
Whoa, what happened there?
I don't know what happened there. Now you're muted. You were not muted and we can hear you, but now you're muted.
Hello?
We're good. We can hear you.
You're back.
All right, we're out anyway. Yeah, because I'm roboting. Martinez, thank you. Jonah, thank you. Have a wonderful time.
Thanks,
we
man.
have another JQ coming up with CT and Avi. It's not been agreed upon, but it will be coming. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Justin, you got anything?
No, I'm good. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you very
Have a
much.
good one.
We're out.
Thanks
See
for
ya.
having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was spicy. You still there, bro? We're still going. Yeah. I'm going to end it in a second. I'm going to put up that little fucking overlay, since my accountant took off today. She is in pain, so we'll let her go. Anyway, thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful time.